Good old River Raid. A fondly remembered classic from the Atari 2600 library that bore a very simple premise that's easy to understand. You're raiding a river. That's it. That's all I have to tell you. That title says it all, actually. River Raid. You raid rivers. That's all you're getting in terms of story, and quite frankly, that was all you ever needed. And it was beautiful. But as good of a game as the original 2600 version of River Raid happens to be, River Raid for Colecovision takes it up a step or two to bring a version that looks better than its VCS original, but still retains that top-notch gameplay. The premise of River Raid on Colecovision remains the same as always. You raid a river, and you do this by blowing up tankers, balloons, bridges, jets, and other things, while occasionally passing over fuel tanks to refill your ever-dwindling fuel tank. Death comes in the form of the traditional collide with anything or when your tank goes empty. Now, despite sharing the same name and same basic play mechanics, this is not the same River Raid that you got on the 2600. On the contrary, though it shares the same basic gameplay principles, the levels in this ColecoVision version are fairly different from the 2600 version due to the updated visuals, so it's essentially a whole new game. There are also some added elements, such as tanks positioned by the shore that will launch projectiles at you to shoot you down, and there's even a little tank crossing the bridge, and taking down the bridge with a tank on it will give you a nice little boost to your score. Other than that, however, gameplay in this Coleco version of River Raid is more or less the same as any other version. Destroy any stationary or moving targets while occasionally flying over fuel depots to refuel. These fuel tanks can also be destroyed for bonus points, so there's that added element of decision making that you need to take into consideration, and that's also part of the overall challenge of River Raid. Do you spare the tanks to refuel, or blow them up for a bit of a score boost? After all, every 10,000 points earns you a free plane, so yeah, take your pick, son. Life in River Raid is pretty damn good. This is a game that, despite its aged audio and visual presentation, is still as fun to pick up and play today as it was back when it was brand spanking new. Not to mention it's a pretty slick playing game, giving quite a bit of control over your plane, such as speeding up and speeding down. River Raid doesn't make much use of the number pad other than to select your difficulty setting and number of players at the beginning of the game, but controlling your plane is fairly simple, although I think it moves a bit too quickly for my taste compared to the 2600 version. There were instances where I had to inch my way to make more precise movements. Also, this version of River Raid only features shots that you can control with your plane. I would have liked the ability to disable this feature like you could on the 2600 version, but it's not a total deal breaker. When River Raid made its way over to the Atari 5200, the upgrade and visuals were minimal at best. It looked like your usual 2600 version with more appropriate landmasses and other bits that aren't worth mentioning. When River Raid made its way over to ColecoVision, the upgrade in visuals was rather substantial, as every bit of element in the game was redrawn to look less blocky and a bit more detailed, or as detailed as you could get in the early 1980s. The end result is a River Raid that looks pretty damn slick for the time, and could possibly have been something that looked somewhat decent in the mid-1980s. Anything beyond that, and it would have looked dated for obvious reasons. Still, it looks good, scrolling's pretty smooth as well, and that's fine. Sound in River Raid. Not a whole lot to it, but sounds quite nice. The engine sound isn't grady, scratchy white noise, it's rather pleasant, and I like how it changes pitch when the speed of your plane. The rest are the usual explosions and firing sounds, but they sound nice, and refueling plays a nice little jingle. Sound is nice, just like raiding rivers. Overall, River Raid has its place as one of the finest Atari 2600 games ever made, and the same can be said for its ColecoVision counterpart, which, if nothing else, is a substantial improvement over the 5200 version in terms of graphics, sounds, and, well, joysticks. Suffice it to say, if you enjoyed the 2600 version, and if you've got a ColecoVision laying around, give this version of River Raid a shot. It's a solid conversion, and another superb offering for the system.